So I'm joined by James Curran, who's here on the Isle of Man after being announced last week that you're going to be the big czar. I don't know if that's over-egging it, but you're going to look after the environmental situation, which of course has become such a large factor now in everyone over here. I mean, I'm sure, like the UK, you know, we've had our die-ins at our Tynwald Day, and it's on everyone's sort of agenda. So tell me, first of all, were you headhunted? Did you apply? You know, was it a process, or did you just given the position?
Yeah, I was approached along, I'm sure, with many others, but that's not for me to say, and interviewed, and fortunately for me, because I think it's a fantastic challenge here on the island, I was selected to lead a team, but ultimately produce my personal report and advice on climate change actions for the island.
And a little bit about your credentials on this then.
Okay, well,
just a little bit.
I've been involved in climate change for something like 30 years now. So it's good news for me anyway, that, as you say, the whole climate change debate has exploded in the last 6 months. And it's important because it is becoming, there's no question to my mind, a climate change emergency. It's a threat to the whole world.
See, that word emergency is so emotive, and you've used it. You put it in that level.
Yes, I would. Because we know the fantastic science, extremely robust science, tells us that we really now need to start moving very fast on mitigating climate change. That is, reducing our carbon emissions very rapidly. We only have a few years window left in order to start reducing so rapidly, and the science tells us that globally we need to be net zero carbon emissions by 2050 in order to prevent the worst and most damaging aspects of climate change. There still will be climate change. We already have climate change. There is no natural weather left in the world. And we're seeing that around the world with more and more severe weather events driven largely by climate change. So we have a very little short window of opportunity left to really start tackling it. And I'm delighted that the Isle of Man has the commitment now to start moving on it. Well,
a few weeks or maybe months now ago, there wasn't a climate emergency. Then suddenly the Chief Minister declares one. It seemed like they were caught on the back foot on this one. You had MHKs like Ralph Peake who had been pushing Mr. Boot on the thing, and it all seemed very... I don't know how much of this you need to know, but you know, suddenly we're playing catch-up, it appears, and suddenly now we're going on the offensive.
Yeah.
But what does the Isle of Man really do in the world stage on climate change, really? I mean, we're tiny, right?
This is an argument often raised that even at the UK level, certainly I'm from Scotland, at the Scottish level, the argument is often raised, well, our emissions are a tiny proportion of the global emissions. And that's undoubtedly true. But so much can be done by setting an example, demonstrating and proving to others that with the commitment you can make really substantial changes. And if the whole world follows the same pathway, yes, it's difficult and it needs commitment and it needs investment, but ultimately we will all end up actually with a healthier planet and a better lifestyle.
Are you staggered?
So it's the demonstration of that capability.
So is it? Yeah. Well, okay. So it's more just saying, look at us. We are doing our piece.
Yeah.
But we're not going to make any difference to the world climate overall by 0.00.
Every ton of carbon makes a difference.
Are you not slightly surprised that the Isle of Man has no wind farms? The electric car market is not even subsidised like in the UK, and you know, a lack of commitment maybe over the years has gone on here. You must be surprised on the low level of, so far, renewables are here.
You can look at it two ways. I mean, there is now such a resource available there, and there's a right time to move on all of these things. I mean, the endeavour that has gone into creating the kind of wind farms that we have now has taken an enormous amount of investment worldwide and a very heavy level of subsidy for many, many years. Whereas now it's moving into the commercially viable zone that it no longer needs subsidy. So there's a right time actually to move, and you can get additional benefit out of that. So I'm not going to be critical, no.
Okay. Your report, you're under a fairly tight timescale. I mean, you've got to produce one in a few months' time, haven't you?
Yep.
Is that your first, intermediate one? I mean, how long are you on this gig for?
I'm taken on to produce a report by the end of November, giving my personal recommendations on what a climate change action plan should be.
I'm going to be slightly sort of, I was going to say it's going to be the bleeding obvious stuff. You're going to come up with, we need this, we need that, which is, anyone could just say, well, that's what they've got. We need the same, right? You haven't got any completely blue thinking sort of, blue sky sort of radical ideas, or maybe you have, but you can go and tell me.
Well, I mean, technically, we know how to do these things. All the technology is available, but each circumstance needs a very different deployment of different technologies in different sequences in order to do it in the most practical, achievable, financially prudent, sensible way. And I think a key these days, referring back to what I was saying earlier, is to get private investment to take a good part of the load. It doesn't necessarily need all to fall to the public purse these days. That needs to be customised to every particular situation.
One thing that everyone talks about is tidal. The future we know when the tides are going to happen. We've got the most amazing tides around here. Do you see some movement in that side, which will be radical? It would be trendy. That's the wrong word, but it'd be trend setting.
Yep.
I mean, I know Channel Islands have looked at something similar, haven't they? And it's costly because it's new, right?
Yes.
And that's always the problem.
Yeah.
If it's brand new, it's not going to be cost effective.
Yeah, which is, again, refers back to what I was saying about being at the right point in order to move into these new technologies. Tidal, I believe, has a great future, but it's not quite there yet. It still is risky, it's still costly. Putting anything in the sea, and I used to be an oceanographer, it's a very hostile environment.
But it is the only one that knows what it's doing, whereas compared with solar or wind,
you're
right?
absolutely right. And renewable power, generally, wind and sun, is intermittent.
Yeah.
So you always need to balance that out with predictable energy supply. Sure. And tidal's a good one, and I'm sure at the right time there'll be a great opportunity here as well.
There was a fanfare a couple of years ago, something was going to happen up on the Point of Air, but that's fallen through.
Yeah.
How much support have you got from government? Or is that too early to say? Is it a question of will they act upon your advice?
I can only base it on my experience up to this point, and I've come across nothing but encouragement, positivity and enthusiasm, and as far as I can tell, commitment. So I'm working on that basis.
And how's your carbon footprint? I'm being sarcastic here now. You can be flying backwards and forwards. I mean, you can be coming backwards and forwards.
All I can say is I'm sensitive about that.
Yeah.
I've always avoided flying whenever I can. I've already offset all my flights to and from the island. My own carbon footprint, I'm not claiming I'm great. I never criticise people for their carbon footprint, because although I understand an awful lot about the theory and the practice of climate change mitigation, it is hard to behave in the best possible way. For a short time in my life, I ran an eco-store in the city centre in Glasgow. And at that time I measured my carbon footprint, and it was 2.05 planets. Planets, yeah. We all live life in Europe as if we have 3 planets to support us. Right. Of course, we only have one in reality, so we're living way beyond our environmental means. And it's estimated that to close that gap and get down to 1 planet living, which is true sustainable living, you can do half of that by personal choice. The other half needs government intervention. So I got down to very close to 2 through personal choice. But that's quite unusual, and I would not claim at all to be still down at 2 planet living. But to get down to true long-term sustainability of 1 planet living needs quite a lot of change of public policy.
We will be following your journey with interest. I hope you'll be able to be having interviews with you from time to time.
I hope so too.
And people will be watching this in 100 years or 1,000 years' time. They'll know the answers, presumably, of how you did.
They'll be living entirely differently, and they'll be living better.